and Politics Hour this Tuesday. We have a full one for you. And as we do most every week, we check in inside the Beltway with Jennifer Lawless down at American University, professor of politics, head of the Women in Politics Institute there, heading to UVA next year. Always appreciate getting the inside scoop on politics down there. How are you today, Jennifer?
I'm fine. How are you?
Doing well up here. Lots going on in Rhode Island, but certainly lots nationally. Even since we were in touch earlier today, breaking news out of D.C., the Office of Special Counsel found that Kellyanne Conway violated the Hatch Act for talking about candidates during the Alabama special Senate race. Where did this come from?
I think it highlights that nobody in the Trump administration is inoculated against the special counsel's investigation. And also, it's a clear warning sign that the administration has to be more careful about blurred lines, not only blurred lines between the campaign, Trump's businesses, and the White House, but even the manner in which surrogates talk about it. Now, the case is a little bit tricky because technically she could probably make the argument that she was not explicitly endorsing or supporting candidates. She was talking more generally about the types of people in the Senate who could help the president move his agenda forward. But, that's an argument that will be left up to, to litigate. Of course, the other thing that's important here, too, is the penalty is basically nil, right? It's up to the president to decide how he wants to discipline her. And my bet is it's going to be with a pat on the back.
That was going to be my question, the ramifications of this. Will this continue to be, political talk show fodder for the following days? Or as you said, because of the fact that there just might not be any consequence, do you think this will just sort of be a blip on the radar screen?
Well, I think it'll be a blip on the radar screen, not only because there are a few consequences, but also because there's so much more going on right now that in the broad scheme of things, the Alabama Senate election seems like it took place 47 years ago.
So it does seem like it took place a long time ago, but something that's taken place recently. Let's talk about Sam Nunberg. It was all the news yesterday. This was a former Trump advisor subpoenaed by Mueller, said he wasn't going to cooperate, went on a bizarro interview talk show circuit, and then today basically did a 180.
Yeah, so it was among the best TV hours I've had to view in a long, long time. I was completely glued to the set because you were watching this person come undone and do it with such sort of animation that it was incredible, right? His response to the subpoena was, screw that, I don't want to go. And it's like, that's not really a reason that you don't have to go. The law says you have to go. And what was also particularly interesting to me was that over the course of the interview with Aaron Burnett, for example, by the end, he was offering to turn over his email password to the special counsel's office, and it was no longer a statement that he didn't want to cooperate. It was just that he had too many more important things to do than comb through his own emails. So the whole thing was certainly bizarre. It's, I think, highlighting also, more than the investigation itself, the kinds of people that the Trump administration and the Trump organization had surrounded themselves with. These are people that you should be a little concerned with if they're the ones that are making important decisions, whether they be strategic or policy.
Now, Sam Nunberg, let's just talk about him in general. He had ties to the Trump campaign. Is this just a name that really insiders sort of might have known about before yesterday, and the rest of America might say, Sam who?
Yeah, he didn't have the same kind of name recognition as people like Manafort or Kelly or, Michael Flynn, in large part because he was with the campaign only for a very short time and he was fired. But anybody that knows Roger Stone or that knows about the way that Roger Stone was trying to cultivate Donald Trump to run for president, dating back long before even 2012, would be familiar with Nunberg. So, I think, in the last year and a half, he hasn't really been at the top of everybody's radar screen, but the connections he had prior to the campaign and the inner workings of the Trump organization suggest that he knows a little bit about how Donald Trump operates. Moreover, if he's being subpoenaed, it means that he told the special investigator that there's something he knows that they want to get him under oath saying, which suggests that he's not just a peripheral player. He knows something, and they want that on the record.
Let's talk about another name and connection that was tossed out there in the context of this conversation, Julian Assange.
And that's where Roger Stone comes into play. So the question becomes whether Roger Stone and Julian Assange were going back and forth to sort of either help Russia or provide emails or signal to the Trump campaign that Russia had information that could be damaging to Hillary Clinton. And the fact that Nunberg basically said that he would throw himself in front of a bus for Roger Stone suggests that it might very well be those kinds of dynamics. Of course, in addition to throwing himself in front of the bus for Roger Stone and considering Roger Stone a father figure, he said he felt the same way about Donald Trump. So by the end of the interview yesterday, everyone was his father figure, and he was willing to fall on the sword for just about any Republican out there.
As you said, favorite former Trump staffer since Scaramucci.
Yes. And that's a high bar.
Let's talk a little bit. I know it seems like a very long time ago, because pertaining to testifying, granted it wasn't Mueller and it was before the House, but let's talk a little bit about the departure of Hope Hicks now that the dust is settled. We did see a sort of Monday morning quarterbacking of Trump's former communications director, and it came down to the little white lies. Now, again, they asked her if the president asked her to lie on occasion. Will this come back to haunt him?
I mean, I don't know that any testimony from any one person will come back to haunt him. I think it's the full package that paints a picture and offers a narrative of lies and deception and loyalty that are appealing in a movie, but not so appealing in a White House. It's important. Hope Hicks not only admitted to telling little white lies, but she also refused to provide any substantive information to the House. And so that suggests that the little white lies might have been a little bit more than little or white.
So she really was between a rock and a hard place. Do you think that her team prepared her for such a question, for someone who's ever been subpoenaed or interviewed before, going through the preparation process? I mean, she was really behind the eight ball.
She was, although I think that we've seen for the last year and a half, a lot of these administration officials being completely blindsided by procedures and processes that most people with some familiarity with Washington and the political process wouldn't find that stunning, right? And so the upside of bringing in all new people and saying that you're going to start fresh and drain the swamp is that you have the opportunity to do that. The downside is that, similar to the way that you're surrounding yourself with people that don't necessarily have policy expertise or relationships with members of Congress, you're also getting people that don't necessarily know the ins and outs about how testifying before a congressional committee might work.
So what's the talk in D.C. about where Hope Hicks lands next? Does she have to do a book deal to cover her legal fees?
I mean, I read today that she could, within 5 seconds, negotiate at least a $10 million book advance, right? But the question becomes, what is she willing to say? I mean, yeah, she could get that kind of book advance, but is anyone going to actually read it? Is there anything new to learn? So my bet is that she'll do it, but it is a little bit ridiculous to suggest, when she, as she did, that she's going to pursue new opportunities. You're 29 years old and you have pretty much the best opportunity in the entire world right on your lap right now. Like, you're going to achieve something better than this. It's clear that it wasn't as much of a choice as she suggested, but I could also see if a book doesn't work out. I mean, a lot of these Trump surrogates, a lot of the people that were active on this campaign trail find a seat at a cable news network desk and become experts on everything Donald Trump. And she certainly looks the part, and she was the communications director that gives her credentials and credibility in a way that some of these other surrogates didn't have during the campaign.
So let's turn a little bit to policy-wise down in D.C. while we have you here, Jennifer. Let's talk about Trump's tariffs. It looks like it's creating a big rift within the GOP. What are the prospects?
I think the prospects are pretty bleak. Not only has Cohen said that he'll probably leave if these tariffs go through, but it's hard to find any mainstream Republicans who think that this is a good idea. And on top of that, it's also hard to find anybody who has any background in economics who's willing to say that the tariffs aren't going to cost more jobs than they ultimately generate. So, yes, Donald Trump promised new manufacturing jobs. He thinks that the steel and the aluminum industries are a way to do that. And there's no question that he's going to be able to create jobs there. But there are going to be trickle-down effects where these tariffs basically lead us to lose 3 jobs for every new one that's created. And that's just not going to be helpful, especially in some of the rural industrial areas that he won.
And let's talk a little bit about DACA. The sort of arbitrary deadline came and went yesterday of Trump saying, Congress, you figure it out by March 5th. Where are we now?
we're basically nowhere. The Supreme Court said that they were not going to hear this case. They were not going to allow it to leapfrog past the appellate stage and go directly to the court. A Maryland court said yesterday that winding down DACA is okay, but there have been 2 other courts that have said that it's not okay. So basically, for the indefinite future, everybody who's on one of these permits can continue every 2 months to have them renewed. So there's really no solution in sight. And Steny Hoyer just announced that he's not going to push the Democrats to demand a DACA vote on the omnibus spending bill. So he thinks that they'll be more successful if they have individual bills like the Senate did regarding DACA and immigration, not linked to anything else. But that also generates far fewer incentives for Paul Ryan to make sure that those bills get voted on.
So before I let you go, there's one more thing I do want to talk about, but tell viewers, what are people keeping an eye on in D.C. at the moment?
Well, so I think right now it's Mueller's investigation as usual. The big twist in the plot last night was that it seems like maybe he's not far along as we thought, because some of the questions that some of the documents that he could potentially subpoena or did subpoena and that he could ultimately request a search warrant for have to do with communications, not only with Roger Stone and Donald Trump, but with Paul Manafort, with Michael Flynn. So sort of issues that we thought were already resolved, which suggests that this might be going on a little bit longer than we expected. And the other thing that I think we'll be focusing on, too, are new departures from the White House. If Kellyanne Conway makes it through this Hatch Act violation, which she likely will, is Gary Cohn going to stick around post tariffs? If Jeff Sessions going to continue to stick around despite another week of being ridiculed by the president? So it's always an open question, but my bet is that there will be at least some departures in the next week or 2.
So keeping an eye on the departures moving forward. One interesting piece in Politico that was in today is an issue that's kicked around for so many years. Members sleeping in their offices in D.C., and some members calling for an ethics investigation. Their angle is members are taking advantage of free lodging. And of course, on the flip side, members who do so say, I'm showering at the Senate gym. I'm just trying to save some money here. How does this issue keep coming up every so often?
I mean, it's gross, first of all, right? I mean, that Politico article, I think, did a great job saying, too, that, like, you're sleeping in your office and then 5 hours later you're inviting constituents to come in here and have a decent conversation about something. Paul Ryan's justification that he doesn't really get a lot of sleep, so it would be a waste of time to get an apartment. Like, these are insane things to say. And also, I don't think they resonate with the average American who would find the congressional salary, which is around $175,000, certainly sufficient to at least get a studio apartment or share one, right? I mean, you're not going to, crying poverty as a member of Congress, I don't think resonates with the average American.
We've heard stories of the group houses of, Schumer and others together.
Right, like boxes of pizza all over the place, and it's totally disgusting, right? That's acceptable, but, sleeping in your office is kind of gross. I think part of the reason that we might actually see more traction this time around is not only because of the ethics violations and sort of using taxpayer money to subsidize your own life, but also because of the Me Too movement. And the idea of they're mostly male Republicans living in their offices and potentially being in a position to say, oh, they want to have a meeting at 11 p.m. or at midnight, or they want to work on a bill at 1 in the morning, and their chief of staff or their legislative director is a woman, is pretty dangerous. So I think that that's another angle here that in the past didn't necessarily gain the traction that it might this time around.
So you think 2018 could be the year that we see this practice ended?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we are at a time where it's just something that rubs most people the wrong way. And if you knew that you were going to talk to your member of Congress and you were sitting on the couch he slept on that night, I think you might have a different reaction to what you'd be asking for, or how you would treat that meeting.
As always, getting the Inside the Beltway take from Jennifer Lawless. Appreciate your time, Jennifer, and we look forward to talking with you next week.
Have a good week.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Jennifer Lawless down at American University gives us the inside scoop of what's going on inside the Beltway. The breaking news today, special counsel has found that Kellyanne Conway, Trump's spokesperson, potentially violated the Hatch Act by talking about this Alabama special Senate race. But as Jennifer Lawless said, might not be strong ramifications. We'll see what happens with that moving forward. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest. Providence Performing Arts Center announced today its 2018-2019 season And we've got PPAC President Lynn Singleton here in studio.